What happens when a high school bully lays hands on a teacher he thinks can't fight back, only to find out she spent years in the military learning how to handle men twice his size? The sound of chairs dragging across the tiled floor echoed through the chemistry lab at Crestwood High in Fresno, California, as the last students of the day stuffed their notebooks into backpacks. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, bouncing off rows of metal lab tables streaked with chalk dust and the faint smell of ammonia. At the front of the room stood Dr. Selena Wardlow, a woman who carried herself with the calm authority of someone who had seen storms and stood unshaken in the middle of them. She wasn't flashy, no sharp heels clicking across the floor, no theatrical voice trying too hard to command attention. Instead, she wore her confidence in quieter ways, her measured tone, her steady gaze, her precise way of scribbling chemical formulas across the whiteboard. To her students, she was simply Dr. W, a teacher who never raised her voice, yet always got respect, or almost always. At the back of the classroom sat Trent Mallory, a 17-year-old junior whose reputation reached the halls long before he did. The son of a local contractor, Trent carried himself with the smugness of someone who thought the rules bent differently for him. His tall frame leaned back in his chair, sneakers kicked up on the rung of the desk in front, his smirk daring anyone to challenge him. Selena knew Trent well. She had seen his sarcasm, his thinly veiled jabs, and the way he sometimes whispered crude jokes when her back was turned. She had let a lot slide, but today felt heavier. There was something different in his stare, a fire that wasn't about chemistry homework or teenage attitude. "All right," Selena said, clapping her hands softly as the last set of beakers clinked into the cabinet. "Make sure you've reviewed the lab report guidelines. Safety goggles aren't just for show, Trent." Her words were calm, but her eyes flicked toward the back where he sat. The room chuckled lightly, students glancing nervously between them. Trent's smirk widened. "Yeah, sure thing, Dr. W. Wouldn't want to mess up my $1,000,000 face." A couple of students snickered, though no one laughed too loudly. They'd seen what Trent could do with words when he picked a target. He had a sharp tongue, one that didn't just cut, but aimed where it hurt. Selena ignored him, continuing with her wrap-up instructions, but Trent wasn't done. He leaned forward, his voice dropping low enough for the two students nearest to him, but loud enough for Selena to catch. "Bet she's real tough outside of here. Probably had to fight her way into the job." The words weren't loud, but the poison behind them was clear. One of the students shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Another scribbled quickly, eyes down, pretending not to hear. Selena's chalk squeaked to a stop on the board. She inhaled slowly, keeping her back turned for a moment before finishing the equation. Years of teaching had taught her restraint, but restraint wasn't the same as weakness. "Class dismissed," she said evenly, and the room erupted into the usual rush of zippers, chatter, and sneakers squeaking against tile. But Trent didn't move. He stayed in his chair, arms folded, his eyes locked on her. The other students filtered out quickly, aware of the thick tension hanging in the air. Even the chatter in the hall seemed distant. Within 2 minutes, the room had emptied except for one girl still packing her bag slowly and a boy erasing the whiteboard like he always volunteered to do. They noticed Trent lingering and sped up their exit. Selena began gathering lab sheets from the front desk. She wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of reacting, but she felt his stare burrowing into her back. Finally, Trent stood. His chair scraped sharply against the floor, the sound jolting the quiet room. He slung his backpack over one shoulder, but instead of leaving, he sauntered toward her desk, his footsteps slow, deliberate. "You think you know everything, don't you?" he said, his voice carrying a new edge, stripped of the humor his friends usually laughed at. "Talking to me like I'm some dumb kid." Selena looked up, meeting his glare with calm eyes. "Trent, school's over. Whatever's bothering you, this isn't the place." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You think just 'cause you've got that title in front of your name, you can talk down to me? Nah. People like you don't belong here. Everyone knows it." The words cut sharper than before. They weren't about school. They weren't about homework. They were personal. Selena let the silence stretch for a beat before she spoke, her voice steady. "You need to leave, Trent." But he didn't move. Instead, his jaw clenched and his hands balled into fists at his sides. The air in the room thickened, the tension crackling like static before a storm. The two students lingering at the door froze, realizing this wasn't just another spat between teacher and class clown. They exchanged nervous glances, then slipped out quietly, leaving the door half open. Selena's eyes flicked briefly to the door, then back to Trent. She recognized the posture, the clenched jaw, the way his weight shifted forward. She had seen it before, on the streets, in training, in places far away from high school walls. Her instincts told her this wasn't over, but what came next would go far beyond words, and it would push both Trent and Selena into a confrontation no one in Crestwood High could have imagined. The hall outside the lab quieted as lockers slammed shut and footsteps faded toward the parking lot. Inside, Selena Wardlow stacked lab reports into a neat pile, her movements steady but deliberate. She had been in enough tense situations to recognize when someone was circling the line between anger and violence. Trent Mallory wasn't just hanging around to talk. He was testing her, waiting to see how far he could push. Trent dropped his backpack onto a front row desk with a thud and leaned against it, arms folded across his chest. His smirk had faded into something colder. "You know," he said, his voice low, "most teachers wouldn't call me out in front of everyone." "You think that makes you smart?" Selena kept her tone even. "I corrected you because it was necessary. That's my job. I treat you the same as anyone else in this room." "Don't lie," Trent shot back. "You single me out all the time. Every time I talk, every time I move, like you've got some grudge against me." She straightened, meeting his eyes. "I don't hold grudges, Trent. What I do expect is respect. For me, for this classroom, for the people around you. And if you can't give that, there are consequences." The corner of his mouth twitched. He stepped closer, dragging the desk slightly with his hip. "Consequences? What are you gonna do, write me up? Call my dad? He doesn't care. He'll just laugh about it. I don't get punished at home, Dr. W. You really think a detention's gonna scare me?" There it was, the arrogance, the shield he wore to cover something uglier. Selena had seen students like him before, but there was something about Trent that dug deeper. His words weren't just rebellious teenage bravado, they were sharpened, personal. She chose her next words carefully. "I'm not here to scare you, Trent. I'm here to teach you. Whether you want to take that seriously is your decision." For a moment, his eyes flickered, as if her calmness unsettled him more than anger ever could. But then he stepped in closer, closing the gap between them. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" His voice cracked slightly, raw with something he wasn't used to showing. "Walking around with your PhD, thinking you're so tough. But you don't belong here." You never did. Selena's pulse steadied. She'd heard versions of this before. She'd been underestimated her whole life, written off by people who assumed they knew her story. But she wasn't about to let a teenager drag her down into an argument she couldn't win. "Trent," she said quietly, "I'm not your enemy. But the way you're talking right now, it's not going to end the way you think." For the first time, Trent's composure cracked. His voice rose, bouncing off the lab walls. "Don't tell me how it's gonna end. You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through." His shout startled the few students still lingering down the hall, who peeked back in through the half-open door. Their eyes widened, sensing the danger rising in the room. One of them whispered, "We should go get someone," but the other pulled them away, nervous to get involved. Trent slammed his hand down on the desk so hard a glass beaker rattled on the counter nearby. "I said you don't know me." Selena's voice dropped to a measured calm. "You're right. I don't know everything about you, but I know this. You're crossing a line. And once you cross it, there's no going back." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a moment, Trent froze, breathing hard, his fists clenching and unclenching. He looked at her like he was deciding whether to back off or push forward. Then he made his choice. He shoved the desk aside, the screech of metal legs against tile echoing like nails on a chalkboard. His chest heaved as he advanced another step, close enough now that Selena could see the flush of anger rising up his neck. "You think you can tell me what to do?" he growled. "You don't scare me." "None of this scares me." Selena squared her shoulders. She didn't flinch, didn't back away. She met his stare with the steady patience of someone who had faced real threats before. "You should leave now," she said firmly. But Trent only smirked, a wild gleam flashing in his eyes. He leaned in, his voice a whisper now, dripping with contempt. "Or what? What are you gonna do if I don't?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Outside, the fading footsteps in the hall left them completely alone. The only sounds were Trent's uneven breathing and the faint buzz of the lights overhead. Selena set the stack of papers down slowly, her hands steady even as she measured the danger in front of her. She'd been trained for moments like this, not in classrooms, but in places where a single wrong move could mean the difference between walking away or never walking again. Her instincts told her to brace, but she had no idea just how far Trent was willing to go, and his next move would turn a war of words into something far more dangerous. The desk rattled one last time as Trent shoved it aside, the sound echoing in the empty lab. His eyes burned with something darker than defiance, something raw, unpredictable. Selena Wardlow had seen men twice his size in combat zones wear that same look right before doing something reckless. Her mind tightened into focus. Trent stepped forward in one swift motion. His hand shot out and clamped around her throat. It wasn't a shove, it wasn't a push. It was a grip, fingers digging in with real intent. For a split second, Selena's vision narrowed, not from the pressure, but from the flash of memory, sand, heat, a man in uniform lunging at her during a training exercise years ago. The drill sergeants barked commands in her ear. Her body didn't need her brain to catch up. Training lived in her bones. Trent sneered down at her. "What now, huh? Still think you're in charge?" Selena's voice came out steady despite the pressure. "Let go, Trent." But his grip tightened. His knuckles whitened. His jaw locked like stone. The arrogance he wore in class was gone. This was something uglier, rage without a leash. For 2 seconds, the lab was silent, except for his heavy breathing. The silence was broken by the faint gasp of a student still in the hallway, frozen in shock at what they were seeing through the open door. Selena's hands rose, not in panic, but in precision. She turned her head slightly, tucking her chin against his wrist, shifting the angle. With a swift movement drilled into her muscle memory, she struck his forearm with the heel of her palm while twisting her shoulder under his arm. The motion broke his grip instantly, forcing his wrist back at an angle he wasn't prepared for. Trent let out a sharp grunt of pain, stumbling back half a step. His confidence cracked, but Selena didn't stop. She pivoted, guiding his momentum downward, using his own size against him. In seconds, he was off balance, his back slamming against the edge of a lab table. A beaker tipped and shattered on the floor. The sound snapped through the air like a warning shot. "Get your hands off me," Selena commanded, her voice carrying the weight of someone who'd given that order before. Not in a school, but in places far harsher. Trent winced, trying to regain his footing. You think you're tough?" His words wavered, the bravado faltering under the sting of being overpowered. Selena held her ground, body angled, breathing measured. She wasn't shaking, not a hint of panic in her stance. The years of discipline, of training to react under pressure, had all led her here. Trent lunged again, this time with both hands out. But Selena moved faster. She sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and twisted it behind his back in a controlled hold. His knees buckled as pain shot through his shoulder. "Let go of me!" he barked, his voice cracking, more desperate now than threatening. "Stop resisting," Selena said firmly, her tone that of a drill instructor, not a high school teacher. "You don't want this to get worse." The door creaked wider, and one of the students who'd lingered earlier, a girl with trembling hands clutching her phone, whispered to her friend, "Should I call the office?" Her friend nodded quickly, eyes wide. "Yeah." Now Trent twisted, trying to break free, but Selena's hold tightened just enough to keep him pinned without injury. She wasn't attacking him, she was controlling him. She knew exactly how much force to apply. Not too much, not too little. "Look at me, Trent," she ordered. His breathing came in ragged bursts. He glared, but his bravado had cracked wide open. What he saw wasn't a teacher he could intimidate. It was a woman who had stared down worse than him and hadn't flinched. "You're done," she said sharply. The weight of her words landed heavier than her grip. For the first time, he realized he wasn't the one in control. The hallway outside filled with hurried footsteps, an assistant principal, 2 teachers, and the custodian rushing in after hearing the crash of glass. They froze for a moment, taking in the scene. Trent pinned against the lab table, Selena holding him steady, her expression calm but firm. "What's going on here?" the assistant principal barked. Selena didn't move her eyes from Trent. He assaulted me. I restrained him. That's all you need to know right now. The room went silent. The teachers stared in disbelief, caught between shock and recognition of the danger they'd just walked into. The custodian carefully stepped around the broken glass, muttering under his breath, "Lord have mercy." Trent struggled one last time, but his energy was gone. His fight had evaporated. The assistant principal motioned to one of the teachers, "Go call the office." In security, Selena released Trent slowly, pushing him forward just enough to keep him from falling, but no longer holding him down. He staggered, rubbing his shoulder, his face flushed with anger and humiliation. "You're gonna regret this," he spat, his voice trembling. Selena stood tall, her breathing steady, her gaze fixed on him. "The only thing I regret," she said, "is that you thought hurting me was ever an option." But as word of what happened began to ripple through the school, the fight inside that lab was about to spark questions and consequences far bigger than the clash between one teacher and one student. The hallway outside the lab had gone from empty to crowded in minutes. A few students who'd heard the shouting and the sound of breaking glass were now whispering in clusters, phones clutched tightly in their hands, though none dared to record. It wasn't every day you saw a teacher physically restrain a student, and it wasn't just any student. It was Trent Mallory, the boy who strutted through Crestwood High like he owned it. Inside the lab, the atmosphere felt like the air after a lightning strike, sharp, buzzing with leftover tension. Trent stood against the table, rubbing his arm and glaring, while Dr. Selena Wardlow kept her posture tall, her face composed. To anyone walking in fresh, it might have looked like just another argument. But those who had been there, the handful of students lingering near the doorway, knew what they'd seen. One of them, Caden Ruiz, a quiet sophomore who usually kept to himself, couldn't stop replaying the image in his head. Trent's hand on Dr. Wardlow's throat, her calm but decisive movements breaking free, the way she'd taken control in seconds. He had never seen anyone handle Trent like that. He whispered to the girl next to him, Allison Greer, who still looked pale, clutching her phone like it was an anchor. "You saw that, right?" Allison swallowed hard. He grabbed her. I thought..." She stopped herself, glancing back at the doorway as if the walls themselves might be listening. "I thought he was going to hurt her bad." Caden nodded slowly, eyes wide. "And she just flipped it, like she knew exactly what to do." Allison shook her head, the fear in her voice softening into awe. "She wasn't scared. Not even for a second." The assistant principal, Mr. Dalton Green, rushed in fully now, flanked by 2 security staff. His gray suit jacket flared as he pointed sharply at Trent. "Sit down, Mallory." Now Trent's face twisted, humiliation burning brighter than anger. "She attacked me," he shouted, pointing at Selena. "She went crazy." Gasps rippled through the hall. Allison whispered furiously to Caden, "That's not what happened." "He's lying." Caden's jaw clenched. For once, he wanted to speak up, to defend the teacher who had always treated him with respect, who had never mocked him when others did. But his throat tightened. He was a student. Trent was the kind of guy who made your life miserable if you crossed him. Inside the room, Selena's voice cut clean through the noise. "No, he put his hands on me. I defended myself." Her words were steady, clipped, not one syllable wasted. Security guards moved closer to Trent. One, a broad man with calm eyes, said firmly, "We'll walk you to the office." Trent shoved past a chair. "You're all blind. She's lying. Enough." Mr. Green's voice cracked across the room like a whip. "Not another word." For a moment, the entire space froze. Teachers who had arrived stood with their mouths tight, some shifting uncomfortably as if they couldn't decide who to believe. But the students in the doorway knew the truth. They had seen it. Allison's chest rose and fell quickly. She leaned closer to Caden. "If people don't say what really happened, they'll twist it. They'll make her look like the bad guy." Caden's stomach churned. He hated being in the spotlight, but he also hated lies. Finally, he stepped forward, his sneakers squeaking faintly on the tile. His voice was shaky, but loud enough to cut through the chatter. "I saw it." He grabbed her. The room went silent. Trent's head snapped toward him, eyes blazing. "Shut up, Ruiz. You don't know what you saw." Caden's knees trembled, but he stood his ground. "I know what I saw. You grabbed her throat. She didn't start it. You did." Allison found her courage next. Her voice was soft at first, but strengthened with each word. He's right. I saw it too. She defended herself. A wave of whispers rolled through the students gathered outside. For the first time, the narrative shifted away from Trent's control. His smirk faltered, cracks forming in the mask he wore so easily. Mr. Green turned, looking from the students to Selena. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing with the weight of what had just been revealed. "We'll handle this in the office," he said firmly. "Right now." Trent kicked the desk as security guided him out, but his bravado had thinned. He spat out, "This isn't over." But the words rang hollow compared to the sharp, disciplined authority Selena had just displayed. As the hallway cleared, Allison and Caden lingered a moment longer, hearts still pounding. Allison whispered, "Do you think she'll be okay?" Caden exhaled slowly, watching Dr. Wardlow as she straightened the papers on her desk like nothing had happened, her composure intact. "Yeah," he said finally, his voice steadier now. "She'll be okay. I'm not so sure about him, though." But while Selena had regained control of the room, outside those walls, the story was already racing ahead of her, spreading through Crestwood High faster than anyone could stop it. By the next morning, Crestwood High was a powder keg. Students crowded around lockers, whispering about the lab incident like it was already legend. Every version of the story sounded different depending on who told it. Some swore Dr. Selena Wardlow had slammed Trent Mallory into the floor like an action movie. Others claimed Trent had walked away without a scratch. The truth was somewhere in between, but gossip rarely cared about truth. Selena walked down the hallway that morning with her head high, though she felt the stairs pressing against her like heat. Teachers nodded politely, some offering sympathetic looks, but most avoided lingering too long. She could feel their unease. No one wanted to be the first to pick a side. When she entered the staff lounge, the chatter stopped. A few teachers stirred their coffee, pretending to read emails, while others glanced at her quickly before looking away. Selena placed her lunch bag in the fridge and poured herself a cup of tea. Her movements were calm, but she could sense the tension wrapping the room. Finally, one teacher, Miss Harding, broke the silence. "Selena, I heard what happened yesterday. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Selena replied, her voice steady. "But Trent isn't." The words hung in the air. Some teachers looked startled, as if she had said something too blunt, but she meant every word. Trent had crossed a line most students never would, and it had cost him. Later that morning, Selena was called to the principal's office. Principal Warren Jeffries, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, sat behind a mahogany desk stacked with folders. His tone was serious, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. "Dr. Wardlow," he began, folding his hands, "you understand why you're here. What happened in your lab yesterday, it's serious. Parents are calling. The district superintendent has already left me 3 messages." Selena sat down, her back straight. "Yes, I understand. Trent assaulted me. I restrained him. That's what happened." Jeffries sighed. "That's your side of it. But Trent's father is claiming you used excessive force. He's threatening legal action against the school if we don't take this seriously." Her jaw tightened, but she kept her voice calm. "I didn't attack him. I defended myself. There are witnesses, students who saw everything. They already spoke up yesterday." The principal rubbed his forehead. "I know. Caden Ruiz and Allison Greer, their statements help, but..." He paused. "You know how these things go. The Mallory family has influence in this town. His father sits on the zoning board. His mother runs the biggest real estate firm in Fresno County. They're not going to let this go easily." Selena met his eyes. "So what are you saying? That because of their last name, the truth doesn't matter?" Jeffries hesitated, then leaned back. "I'm saying this is bigger than one classroom incident. The school board is already asking for a formal investigation. And until then, Trent's father is pushing for your suspension." The words hit like a gut punch, though Selena's face didn't show it. Suspension, for defending herself. "You can't be serious," she said. "I don't want this either," Jeffries admitted. "But I have to answer to the board, to the district, to the parents. And right now, they're not all on your side." The door cracked open, and Mr. Green, the assistant principal who had rushed into the lab, stepped in. His expression was firm. "Warren, I was there. I saw what happened. She didn't attack him. She kept control. If anything, she kept it from getting worse." Jeffries looked weary. "Dalton, I know what you saw. But perception is everything. We're already getting calls from reporters. If this turns into a media storm..." Selena stood slowly. Then let it. I won't be painted as the aggressor here. I did my job. I kept my students safe. If that makes the Mallorys uncomfortable, that's their problem. Her voice carried a finality that left the room silent. Jeffries exhaled, staring at the folders on his desk, as if searching for answers he didn't have. By lunch, the story had already spilled beyond Crestwood's walls. Local radio hosts debated it on air. Parents filled Facebook groups with heated arguments, some defending Selena as a hero who protected herself, others accusing her of crossing a line with a student. At a nearby diner, two parents argued loudly enough for the waitress to overhear. She had no right putting her hands on him, one woman snapped. That's not discipline, that's assault. Another parent shook his head. Assault? He grabbed her by the throat. She should have done worse. The waitress refilled their coffee, muttering under her breath, "Wish someone like her had been my teacher back in the day." Back at the school, students whispered in classrooms, trying to piece together the truth. Caden sat quietly at his desk, still replaying the moment in his mind. Allison leaned over and whispered, "Do you think they'll believe us?" Caden shrugged, his voice low. "They have to. We saw it. We know what happened." But the truth wasn't the only thing at stake anymore. With Trent's family pulling strings and the community dividing itself, the fight over what really happened in that lab was about to grow bigger than anyone expected. By the time Thursday rolled around, Selena Wardlow's name wasn't just a topic inside Crestwood High, it had spilled into the local news cycle. A small piece ran on the evening broadcast of KSEE 24 Fresno, framing the story as an altercation between a teacher and student. The segment was short, vague, and careful with its language, but one line caught everyone's attention. According to sources, Dr. Wardlow previously served in the U.S. military before becoming a teacher. That revelation spread like wildfire. Suddenly, people weren't just debating whether she overreacted, they were speculating about what her military past meant. At lunch that day, the teacher's lounge buzzed with quiet conversations. Ms. Harding leaned over her salad and whispered, "Did you hear?" She was military police. That explains, well, everything. Across the table, Mr. O'Neill frowned. It explains how she handled herself, sure, but it also makes this mess trickier. Parents are already saying she used combat training on a teenager. Selena sat at the edge of the room, eating in silence. She'd known it was only a matter of time before her past came out. She hadn't kept it a secret. Her resume listed her service. But most of her colleagues never asked, and she never offered stories. She liked it that way. She wasn't ashamed of her past, but she wanted to be known as an educator, not just a veteran. That evening, Selena returned home to her small ranch-style house on the edge of town. She set her keys on the counter and fed her dog, a shepherd mix named Boone. The hum of the news carried faintly from the living room, where yet another panel of commentators debated her choices in the classroom. She muted the TV and sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapping around a mug of tea. Her thoughts wandered back to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, where she had spent the toughest years of her 20s. She could still hear the cadence calls, the barked orders, the clatter of boots on gravel. She remembered nights when exhaustion weighed heavier than her rucksack, and mornings when discipline was the only thing that got her out of bed. She had learned then how to stand tall, how to stay calm under pressure, how to see a threat and respond without hesitation. But with those memories came others. The roadside checkpoint in Iraq, the time a fellow soldier froze during an ambush, and she had to drag him to cover. The sting of loss when people she trained with didn't make it home. She closed her eyes, steadying her breath. She hadn't used those instincts in years, not until Trent's hand closed around her throat. In that moment, she hadn't been a teacher. She had been a soldier again, and that was the part the world would never understand. She hadn't chosen to fight. She had chosen to survive. The next day, Principal Jeffries called her back into his office. Sitting across from him was a district representative, Angela Crandall, a woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tone. "Dr. Wardlow," Crandall began, "your service record has come to our attention. We respect your history and thank you for your service, but some parents are concerned that your training may have influenced how you handled this situation." Selena folded her hands in her lap. "My training saved me. Without it, you'd be reading about a teacher in the hospital instead of sitting across from me right now." Jeffries shifted uncomfortably, but Crandall pressed on. "We're not dismissing what you did. But optics matter. A military police officer restraining a 17-year-old, parents are framing it as excessive. They're saying you should have stepped back, called for help. Selena leaned forward slightly, her voice firm but calm. Do you know how long it takes for help to arrive when someone has their hand on your throat? Seconds matter. I didn't hurt him. I neutralized him. That's the truth. For once, Jeffrey spoke up. She's right. If she hadn't acted, this could have been worse. We'd be talking about serious injury, maybe worse. And then what would the parents say? Crandall pursed her lips, scribbling notes. I'll bring this back to the board. In the meantime, we recommend you limit discussion of your service. The less focus on your military background, the better. When the meeting ended, Selena walked out into the sunlit courtyard, the weight of her past heavier than ever. Students sat in clusters on the lawn, their conversations buzzing with fragments of her name. Some looked at her with admiration, others with suspicion. She could feel both equally. That afternoon, Caden approached her cautiously after class. He lingered by the door until the other students left, then stepped inside. Dr. W., he said softly. Yes, Caden? He swallowed, his voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted to say, I think what you did was brave. My dad's a veteran. He always tells me you never forget your training. He says it becomes part of you. I think that's what happened with you. For the first time all week, Selena felt the tightness in her chest loosen. She gave him a small, genuine smile. Your dad's right. Training never leaves you, but neither does responsibility. Remember that, Caden. Caden nodded, his eyes thoughtful. I will. As he left, Selena stood at the window for a moment, watching him disappear into the crowd of students. She knew the fight wasn't over. The Mallory family was still pressing, the board was still circling, and the community was still divided. But hearing those words reminded her why she came back from the military to teach in the first place. But the real showdown was still ahead, because Trent's parents weren't about to let their son take the fall quietly, and the entire town was about to witness the consequences. Saturday morning in Fresno brought gray skies and the kind of damp chill that seeps into your bones. At Crestwood High, the parking lot was already filling with cars, unusual for a weekend. The school board had called an emergency meeting open to parents and the community. Word spread quickly, and by the time the clock struck 10, the auditorium was nearly packed. Selena Wardlow sat near the front with Principal Jeffries and Mr. Green. She wore a navy blazer, her posture straight, her face calm. Inside, though, she braced herself. She'd been through interrogations before, though never in a room full of parents and teenagers whispering about her every move. At the other side of the room sat Richard and Melinda Mallory, Trent's parents. Richard wore a pressed suit and a scowl, his reputation as a sharp-tongued businessman already preceding him. Melinda's pearl necklace caught the fluorescent light as she whispered furiously to her husband. Trent sat slouched between them, his face a mask of defiance, though the redness around his eyes betrayed sleepless nights. The board chair, a heavy-set man named Kenneth Poole, banged the gavel. We're here today to address the incident involving Dr. Wardlow and student Trent Mallory. We'll hear statements from both sides, then decide on appropriate measures. Richard Mallory wasted no time. He stood, his voice booming. My son was assaulted. Assaulted in his own school by the very person who should be protecting him. This is unacceptable. If this district does not act, we'll pursue legal action. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Selena kept her eyes steady, refusing to break her composure. Mr. Green rose next. With respect, that's not what happened. I saw it. Trent grabbed Dr. Wardlow by the throat. She restrained him without causing harm. She prevented the situation from escalating. Richard scoffed. That's your spin. My boy's no saint, but he's not violent. She humiliated him. Before the chair could respond, a voice piped up from the crowd. Caden Ruiz stood nervously, his palms slick, but he forced the words out. That's not true. I saw it too. He grabbed her first. She didn't hurt him. She stopped him. Allison Greer stood next, her voice trembling but clear. I was there too. If she hadn't stopped him, he would have hurt her. Everyone needs to know that. The room fell quiet. Dozens of eyes turned toward the two students. Their courage cut through the noise in a way adult arguments never could. Richard's face darkened. Children shouldn't decide this matter. But Selena finally rose, her voice calm yet carrying across the entire room. Enough! The words silenced the auditorium. She scanned the crowd, her gaze steady. I've listened to accusations and half-truths all week. Here is the full truth. Trent put his hands on me. I defended myself. Not with anger, not with violence, with control. Because I've spent years learning how to handle conflict without destroying the person on the other side. She paused, letting the words sink in. Yes, I served in the military. I've seen worse than what happened in that lab. I've faced real danger and I've lost people I cared about. What I learned from all of that is simple. Control is not about power. It's about responsibility. I didn't harm your son, Mr. Mallory. I stopped him before he made a mistake he couldn't take back. The auditorium was silent, except for the faint shuffle of papers in the back. Selena continued, her voice softening. We tell our students every day that their actions have consequences. That respect matters, that words and choices matter. If we let this incident become a question of who has more influence, we fail those students. If we excuse violence because of someone's last name, we send the wrong message. I won't apologize for protecting myself, and I won't apologize for expecting better from my students. Her words carried a weight no one could dismiss. Even Richard Mallory, for all his bluster, shifted uneasily in his seat. The board chair cleared his throat. Thank you, Dr. Wardlow. After considering the evidence and witness statements, the board has decided no disciplinary action will be taken against Dr. Wardlow. As for Mr. Mallory, he will be suspended immediately with mandatory counseling before returning. Gasps rippled through the room again, this time not from outrage, but from surprise. Trent's face crumpled with anger. You're ruining my life, he shouted, but his words rang hollow. Richard grabbed his arm, hissing for him to sit down. As the meeting adjourned, parents filtered out, some whispering, others nodding quietly toward Selena. A few students even clapped softly before being hushed by their parents. Outside, in the cool Fresno air, Caden and Allison approached Selena. Caden spoke first. Dr. W., I just wanted to say thanks. Not just for yesterday, but for standing up today, too. You didn't let them twist it. Selena smiled faintly, her eyes warm. I should be thanking you, too. Speaking up wasn't easy, but you did it anyway. That's what courage looks like. Allison glanced at Trent's family storming off in the distance. Do you think he'll ever change? Selena looked thoughtful. Change is always possible, but it starts with accountability. Today was the first step. The three of them stood there in the quiet for a moment, the weight of the week beginning to lift. Selena knew the story would linger, but so would the lesson. Strength isn't measured by force. It's measured by restraint, by knowing when to hold the line and when to let go. That evening, Selena returned home, Boone padding faithfully at her side. She poured herself tea, sat by the window, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. She had faced worse, but this fight was different. It was about the example she set for the young people watching. Her phone buzzed with a message from Caden. Thank you for everything, Dr. W. We believe you. Selena smiled. She didn't need applause or headlines. She just needed to know that her students had learned something real. And maybe, just maybe, Trent had too. Every action has consequences. Respect is earned, not demanded. And no one should ever underestimate the strength of someone who refuses to be broken. If you believe in stories that shine a light on courage and accountability, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what comes next.